Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for 17 years, and in that time he had witnessed countless moments of joy, competition, humor, and occasional tension between families competing for the grand prize. He had developed an instinct for reading the emotional temperature of the studio, sensing when a moment would bring laughter or when it might bring unexpected drama. But on that overcast February afternoon in 2025, Steve was about to witness something that would forever change his understanding of what courage looked like. He was about to meet a woman whose emotional confession would stop the entire studio in its tracks, creating a moment of such profound vulnerability and honesty that every person present would be forced to confront their own assumptions about strength, marriage, and what it means to truly love someone through the darkest possible circumstances. Before we begin this deeply powerful story, I want to ask you to take a moment and hit that like button, then subscribe to this channel. What you are about to witness is one of the most emotionally raw and ultimately transformative moments in Family Feud history. Your support helps us continue bringing you these important stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the incredible strength people possess even in their most vulnerable moments. Please stay with us for what happens next, because this is a story that will stay with you long after you finish watching. Angela Thompson stood at the podium next to her husband of 21 years, Marcus, and even from a distance Steve could sense that this woman was carrying something heavy that went far beyond normal game show nerves. She was 44 years old, with shoulder-length auburn hair that showed streaks of premature gray she had not bothered to color. She wore a simple cream-colored sweater and dark jeans, nothing particularly memorable or attention-seeking. Her face showed the kind of careful composure that suggested someone who had learned through necessity to maintain control of her emotions regardless of the circumstances. But her eyes told a different story entirely. They held a depth of sadness and exhaustion that spoke of sleepless nights, difficult decisions, and the kind of burden that no one should have to carry alone, but that too many people do carry in silence, because they do not know how else to handle it. The Thompson family from Ohio faced off against the Rodriguez family from California, both teams eager to compete for the $20,000 prize. The Thompson family consisted of Angela and Marcus, their adult son James, who was 23 years old, their daughter Rachel, who was 19, and Marcus's sister Patricia. What the audience did not yet know, what even Steve could not have anticipated, was that Angela was about to share a truth that would transform this game show taping into something far more significant than anyone had expected. The Thompson family had won the main game, though Angela had participated minimally, offering quiet answers when directly asked, but otherwise remaining somewhat detached from the competitive energy around her. Marcus had played enthusiastically, celebrating each correct answer with the kind of vigor that suggested he was genuinely enjoying the experience. The children had been supportive and engaged, cheering for both parents and clearly delighted to be there as a family. Now it was time for fast money, and Marcus had insisted on going first, which was apparently his usual approach to family decisions, based on the easy way everyone had deferred to his preference. As Marcus took his position at the podium, Angela stood with her children and sister-in-law, and Steve noticed something subtle but significant. Both James and Rachel had positioned themselves very close to their mother, and Rachel was holding Angela's hand in a gesture that seemed protective rather than simply affectionate. These adult children were worried about their mother, and that concern was visible to anyone paying close attention. Marcus completed his fast money round with confidence and skill, scoring 122 points. This meant Angela needed only 78 points to secure the $20,000 for their family. It should have been an easy task, a moment of celebration and excitement. But as Angela walked slowly to the podium, Steve felt an inexplicable tightening in his chest, an instinct developed over 17 years that told him something significant was about to happen. "Angela, you doing all right?" Steve asked, and his voice carried a gentleness that went beyond his usual warm hosting persona. The audience quieted in response to his tone, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, even if they could not yet identify what had changed. Angela looked at Steve with those exhausted, sorrowful eyes and said quietly, I need to tell you something before we do this, Mr. Harvey. I need to tell everyone something, because if I do not say it now, I am not sure I will ever have the courage to say it out loud." Steve's expression immediately became serious and concerned. "Okay, Angela. You can tell me anything. We can take all the time you need." Angela took a shaky breath, her hands gripping the podium as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, and what she said would create a moment of such profound silence in the studio that even the sound equipment seemed to amplify the weight of her words. "My husband Marcus has early onset Alzheimer's disease. He was diagnosed 18 months ago at the age of 42. We have not told anyone outside our immediate family because Marcus did not want people to know, did not want to be treated differently, did not want to become that guy with Alzheimer's instead of just Marcus. But I am standing here today realizing that I cannot keep carrying this secret alone anymore, that the isolation of pretending everything is normal is destroying me, and that maybe it is time for the truth to come out even if it is terrifying to say it in front of all these people." The studio went completely silent. The kind of profound, absolute silence where you could hear your own heartbeat, where every person present seemed to collectively hold their breath as they processed what they had just heard. Marcus, who had been standing with the family celebrating his successful fast money round, froze completely. His face cycled through several emotions in rapid succession, shock that Angela had revealed what they had agreed to keep private, confusion about why she had chosen this moment, fear about what this public revelation would mean for him and for their family, and underneath it all, a terrible sadness that suggested he understood why his wife had needed to speak this truth, even if he wished she had not. Steve Harvey stood motionless, his eyes glistening with tears that he made no attempt to hide. After 17 years of hosting, he had developed professional skills for managing emotional moments, but this was beyond anything those skills had prepared him for. This was not about the game show anymore. This was about a woman who had reached her breaking point and had chosen this unlikely moment to finally speak a truth she could no longer carry in silence. "Angela," Steve said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "I cannot even begin to imagine what you have been going through. What you are going through. Thank you for trusting us with this." Angela nodded, tears now streaming down her face. "I am sorry to do this here, to say this in front of all these people, but I think maybe I needed witnesses. I needed to say it somewhere I could not take it back, where it would be real and acknowledged instead of this secret that Marcus and I carry alone while pretending to everyone that our lives are normal." She turned slightly to look at Marcus, and the love and pain in her expression was almost unbearable to witness. "Marcus, I love you more than I can possibly express. You are my best friend, my partner, the father of our children, the person I plan to grow old with. But you are disappearing in front of me, and I do not know how to handle that. I watch you forget things, small things at first, like where you put your keys, or what we talked about yesterday. But now bigger things. Last week you could not remember Rachel's birthday. 2 days ago you forgot that James lives in Chicago now and asked why he was not home for dinner. Yesterday you called me by your sister's name." The audience was openly crying now. Several people had their hands over their mouths or their hearts. Rachel was sobbing quietly, being comforted by her brother James, whose own face showed the strain of watching his mother finally speak the truth they had all been living with in private. Angela continued, her voice breaking but determined. "I am 44 years old, and I am watching my husband slowly disappear. The doctors tell us that with early onset Alzheimer's, the progression is often faster and more aggressive than it is in older patients. They tell us we might have 5 years before he does not recognize us anymore. 5 years before the man I love is gone even though his body is still here. And I am supposed to just accept that, to be strong, to handle it with grace and dignity while our whole future together evaporates in front of me." Steve walked closer to Angela, positioning himself beside her in a gesture of support. "Angela, what you are describing is one of the most difficult things any person can face. Watching someone you love experience cognitive decline, knowing what is coming but being powerless to stop it, That requires a kind of strength most people will never have to find within themselves. Angela shook her head. Everyone keeps telling me I am so strong, that I am handling this so well. But I am not strong, Mr. Harvey. I am barely holding myself together. I cry in the shower every morning where Marcus cannot hear me. I have nightmares about the day he will not remember who I am. I am angry all the time, angry at the universe for doing this to him, to us, to our children. I am exhausted from pretending to be okay, from maintaining normalcy, from protecting Marcus's dignity by keeping this diagnosis secret while I am dying inside from the isolation of it. She paused, wiping her tears with shaking hands. And the worst part is the guilt. I feel guilty for being angry that this is happening. I feel guilty for mourning the future we are not going to have. I feel guilty for the moments when I resent him for getting sick, even though I know that is completely irrational. I feel guilty for needing support when he is the one who is sick. I feel guilty for finally saying this out loud when he did not want anyone to know. Steve's own tears were visible now, and he made no attempt to hide them. Angela, everything you just described, every single feeling you mentioned, is completely normal and valid. You are grieving the loss of your future together while simultaneously trying to care for Marcus in the present. That is called anticipatory grief, and it is incredibly difficult and isolating. The fact that you also feel guilty about having these completely understandable human emotions just shows how much you love your husband and how hard you are being on yourself. He turned to address Marcus directly, his voice gentle but firm. Sir, I know your wife just shared something you wanted to keep private, and I can see that you are shocked and maybe hurt by that. But I need you to understand that your wife has been carrying an impossible burden, trying to protect your privacy while also managing her own grief and fear about what is happening to you, to your marriage, to your family's future. She needed to speak this truth. She needed support. And she chose this moment because sometimes we reach a breaking point where we simply cannot carry something alone anymore. Marcus stood silent for a long moment, his face showing the complex mix of emotions he was processing. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. Angela is right about everything she said. About the forgetting. About how scared I am. About the future we are losing. I asked her to keep it secret because I was ashamed. Because I did not want people to look at me differently, because I wanted to pretend for as long as possible that everything was normal. But I did not think about what that secrecy was doing to her, how isolated she must feel carrying this alone while also taking care of me and protecting our children and managing everything. He walked slowly toward Angela, and when he reached her he took her hands in his. I am so sorry, Angela. I am sorry for making you carry this secret. I am sorry for not thinking about what you needed while I was focused on what I wanted. I am sorry that you are losing me and I cannot stop it from happening. Angela pulled Marcus into an embrace, and they stood together at the podium crying while the entire studio watched in respectful silence. This was not entertainment. This was witnessing the most intimate and painful moment in a couple's life together, and everyone present understood the privilege and responsibility of being allowed to witness such raw vulnerability. Steve addressed the audience and the cameras, his voice still thick with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed something extraordinary. Angela Thompson has been carrying the weight of her husband's Alzheimer's diagnosis in secret for 18 months, trying to be strong for him, for their children, for everyone, while also processing her own grief about losing the future they had planned together. She has just shown us what true courage looks like, which is not being unafraid, but being terrified and speaking the truth anyway, because staying silent had become more painful than the fear of speaking. He continued, his voice growing more passionate. Early onset Alzheimer's disease is a devastating diagnosis. It affects people in their 40s and 50s, people who should be in the prime of their lives, people with young families and careers and decades of future ahead of them. It robs them of their memories, their cognitive abilities, their very sense of self, while their partners and families watch helplessly. And too often, like Angela and Marcus, these families suffer in isolation because of shame or fear of being treated differently or simply not knowing where to find support. Steve turned back to Angela and Marcus. I know you came here today to play a game and maybe win some money, and we are going to finish that if you want to. But I also want to make sure you know about resources that can help you. There are support groups for caregivers of people with Alzheimer's. There are organizations that provide assistance and education. There are other families going through exactly what you are going through, and connecting with them can help you feel less alone. Angela nodded gratefully. I think that is what I needed most, Mr. Harvey. To not feel so alone anymore. To acknowledge what is happening instead of pretending everything is fine. To have permission to grieve what we are losing while also cherishing what we still have. Steve asked gently, do you want to continue with the fast money questions, or do you need to stop and take a break? Angela looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly even as tears continued to stream down his face. I want to continue, Angela said. I want to finish this together while we still can, while Marcus can still be here with me experiencing this moment. Steve nodded with understanding and respect. Okay, we are going to do this together. 25 seconds on the clock whenever you are ready, Angela. Angela took several deep breaths, wiped her eyes and nodded. Steve began the questions, and what happened next demonstrated the remarkable resilience of the human spirit even in the face of devastating loss. Name something that gives you strength when times are hard, Steve said gently. Angela's answer came quietly but without hesitation. Family. My children. Knowing that James and Rachel need me to model how to handle impossible situations with as much grace as I can manage. And Marcus, even as he is changing, his essential kindness and humor are still there, and that gives me strength to keep going. The audience applauded softly, many people still crying but also clearly moved by Angela's answer. Steve's expression showed his deep respect for this woman's strength. Name something you wish you had more of. Time, Angela said, her voice breaking. Time with Marcus while he still knows who I am. Time to make memories before the disease takes them away. Time to prepare our children for what is coming. Just more time. Steve paused before the next question, giving Angela a moment. The audience sat in respectful silence, fully present to the gravity of what they were witnessing. Name the most important quality in a marriage. Showing up, Angela answered. Being there for each other even when it is terrifying and heartbreaking and overwhelming. Choosing each other every day even when the circumstances make it almost unbearably difficult. Love is not just a feeling. It is a choice we make over and over again, especially when that choice becomes harder than we ever imagined it could be. The audience was on their feet now, not in celebration but in recognition of the profound truth Angela had just expressed. Steve had tears streaming down his face as he asked the next question. Name something couples should talk about more. The hard things, Angela said. The fears, the grief, the uncertainty. We spend so much time trying to protect each other from painful truths that we end up isolated and alone with our pain. Marcus and I are learning that talking about what is happening, acknowledging how scared we are, that actually brings us closer instead of pushing us apart. Steve nodded, clearly moved beyond words. He asked the final question. Name what you are most grateful for. Angela looked at Marcus, and the love in her expression was so pure and powerful that it seemed to fill the entire studio, right now. This moment. Marcus is here with me, he knows who I am, he knows who our children are. He can still share experiences with us and make memories, even if those memories will not last forever in his mind. I am grateful for every single moment we still have together, and I am trying to learn to focus on that gratitude instead of the fear of all the moments we will not get to have. The buzzer sounded, and Steve slowly walked to the board, but before revealing the answers, he addressed the studio. I want everyone here, and everyone watching to understand what we just witnessed. Angela Thompson just answered 5 questions while carrying the weight of knowing her husband has a progressive, incurable disease that will eventually take him from her even while his body remains. She did that with honesty, with grace, with love, and with a courage that most of us will never be called upon to demonstrate. He began revealing the answers. Each one appeared on the board, not all as number 1 responses, but all clearly resonating with the survey participants who had been asked these questions. By the time all 5 answers were revealed, Angela had scored 93 points, bringing their family total to 215 points. They had won the $20,000. But the money seemed almost irrelevant in that moment. Steve walked over to Angela and Marcus and addressed them both. "You have won the game today, but more importantly, you have given everyone here and everyone who will watch this episode something far more valuable than money. You have shown us what it means to love someone through impossible circumstances. You have reminded us that vulnerability is not weakness but strength, and you have demonstrated that speaking truth, even terrifying truth, is how we connect with others and find the support we desperately need." As the taping concluded, something remarkable happened. Nearly every person in the studio audience approached Angela and Marcus to offer support, share their own stories of loss and caregiving, or simply embrace them in silent acknowledgement of what they were facing. Several people pressed business cards into Angela's hands for support groups, grief counselors, and Alzheimer's organizations that could provide resources and assistance. An elderly woman who had cared for her husband through Alzheimer's until his death 2 years earlier spoke with Angela for several minutes, sharing hard-won wisdom about the journey ahead and assuring her that while it would be the hardest thing she ever did, she would find strength she did not know she possessed. A middle-aged man whose wife had been diagnosed with early-onset dementia at age 48 told Marcus that he understood the shame and fear, but that accepting support from others had made his journey more bearable. He encouraged Marcus to reconsider his need for secrecy and to allow people who cared about him to walk alongside him through this difficult process. Steve pulled Angela aside before the family left and had a conversation that would become pivotal in her journey forward. "Angela, what you did today took extraordinary courage. I know you said you are not strong, but I need you to understand that what we just witnessed was strength in its purest form. Not the absence of fear or pain, but the willingness to be honest about that fear and pain in order to find connection and support." Angela smiled through her tears. "Thank you for creating space for me to say what I needed to say. Thank you for not rushing me or making me feel like I should have kept it private. Thank you for treating Marcus and me with such dignity and compassion." Steve nodded. "What are you going to do with the $20,000? "We are going to use it to make memories," Angela said without hesitation. "We are going to take our family on the trip we always talked about taking but kept putting off for someday. We are going to do the things on our bucket list while Marcus can still enjoy them. We are going to make the most of whatever time we have left together, because that is all we can control." When the episode aired 12 weeks later, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The Alzheimer's Association reported a massive increase in calls from families dealing with early-onset dementia who had been suffering in isolation and had found courage through Angela's example to reach out for support. Mental health organizations praised the episode for normalizing the complex emotions that come with anticipatory grief and caregiving. Thousands of viewers wrote to the show sharing their own experiences with Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and the challenges of caring for loved ones with progressive cognitive decline. Many expressed gratitude for seeing their own struggles represented honestly on television, for having their feelings of exhaustion, grief, anger, and guilt validated as normal rather than shameful. The episode sparked a national conversation about early-onset Alzheimer's disease, a condition that affects more than 200,000 people in the United States, but receives far less attention and research funding than later onset forms of the disease. Advocacy groups used the episode to raise awareness and push for increased research funding and support services for families affected by early-onset dementia. The network made the decision to do a follow-up segment with the Thompson family 18 months after the original airing. When Angela and Marcus returned to the Family Feud stage, the progression of Marcus's disease was visible, but he was still very much present and aware. He recognized Steve immediately and greeted him warmly, though Angela later shared that Marcus had needed to be reminded several times that morning about where they were going and why. Angela spoke openly about the challenges of the past 18 months and the ways that her public confession had changed their journey. "Speaking the truth on this show was the best decision I could have made, even though it was terrifying at the time. As soon as the episode aired, we were flooded with support from our community, from people who had gone through similar experiences, from organizations that could provide resources and assistance. The isolation that had been crushing me completely lifted, and that made everything more bearable. She described joining a support group for spouses of people with early onset Alzheimer's, where she had found people who truly understood what she was experiencing. Being able to talk honestly about how hard this is, about the grief and the anger and the fear, with people who do not judge me or tell me to be more positive, that has been essential to my ability to keep functioning as Marcus's caregiver and our children's mother. Marcus participated in the follow-up interview to the extent he was able, sharing with touching honesty about his experience of losing his cognitive abilities. The hardest part is not the forgetting itself, but watching how it affects Angela and our children, knowing that I am the source of their pain and not being able to fix it or make it better. But I am grateful that Angela spoke up, that she stopped carrying our secret alone, because the support we have received has helped all of us handle this better than we could have if we had kept suffering in isolation. The James and Rachel spoke about how their mother's public honesty had given them permission to acknowledge their own grief and fear about losing their father. They had both entered therapy to process their emotions and had found support groups for adult children of parents with dementia. They credited their mother's courage with modeling how to face difficult truths, with honesty rather than denial. The follow-up segment concluded with Angela sharing the experiences from their family trip, the bucket list adventure they had taken with the money from Family Feud. They had traveled to national parks Marcus had always wanted to visit, created photo albums and videos documenting their experiences, and made memories that Angela and the children would carry with them, even after Marcus could no longer remember the trips had happened. That trip represented something important. Angela explained. It was us choosing to focus on what we still have rather than what we are losing. Choosing to create joy and beauty and connection in the midst of this terrible situation. That is how we are trying to approach each day now, making the most of Marcus while he is still here with us in meaningful ways, even as we acknowledge that he is slowly slipping away. Steve concluded the follow-up by announcing that his foundation would be partnering with the Alzheimer's Association to provide grants for families dealing with early-onset dementia who needed financial assistance with care costs, support services, or memory-making experiences. The fund had been inspired by Angela and Marcus's story and was dedicated to ensuring that other families facing similar challenges would have access to the resources and support they desperately needed. 5 years after that February afternoon when Angela's emotional confession had brought the studio to complete silence, Marcus's disease had progressed significantly. He required full-time care and no longer recognized most people, including Angela and their children, on many days. But Angela continued to care for him at home with the support of professional caregivers, visiting him his room every day, even when he did not know who she was, because love did not require recognition to be real and valid. Angela had become a prominent advocate for families affected by early-onset Alzheimer's disease. She spoke at conferences, wrote articles, and maintained a blog where she documented her journey with raw honesty that helped thousands of other caregivers feel less alone. She had published a memoir about her experience that became both a bestseller and a resource for families navigating similar challenges. The Thompson family's story had become a touchstone in conversations about caregiving, anticipatory grief, and the importance of speaking truth even when that truth is terrifying. Angela's moment of vulnerable confession on Family Feud had demonstrated that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit we are struggling and ask for the support we need rather than suffering in isolation while trying to maintain an image of having everything under control. As this profound story draws to a close, it is essential to reflect on the critical lessons Angela Thompson taught us through her courage and honesty. Caregiving for someone with progressive dementia is one of the most difficult challenges any person can face, requiring a kind of sustained strength and resilience that most of us will never have to develop. The grief that comes with watching someone you love slowly disappear while their body remains is complex and devastating, and it deserves acknowledgement and support rather than being minimized or dismissed. Angela showed us that asking for help and speaking honestly about our struggles is not weakness but wisdom. That the isolation of carrying difficult truths alone can be as destructive as the difficult circumstances themselves. That connecting with others who understand our experiences can make unbearable situations more bearable. And that choosing to focus on gratitude for what we still have, even while acknowledging the pain of what we are losing, is how we find meaning and purpose in the midst of devastating loss. Before you go, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We share powerful stories like Angela's that remind us of the importance of vulnerability, honesty, and community support in facing life's most difficult challenges. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from Angela's message, particularly those who are caring for loved ones with dementia or other progressive conditions. If you or someone you know is caring for a person with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, please know that you do not have to face this alone. The Alzheimer's Association provides resources, support groups, and assistance. Their helpline is available 24 hours a day at 800-2723900. You are not alone in this journey, and there are people and organizations ready to support you through it. Angela Thompson showed us that even in the face of devastating loss, even when we are losing the person we love most in the world, we can still choose connection over isolation, honesty over pretense, and gratitude for what remains over despair about what is being taken away. That is not just surviving an impossible situation. That is finding meaning and purpose and love even in the darkest circumstances, and that is the most powerful form of strength any of us can possess.